right, welcome to Recovery Report Live. I'm Dan Odess, CEO and founder of GlobalPro. We've been managing the recovery and loss and damage for thousands of policyholders throughout the entire country and abroad, managing more than $1 billion in loss. And right now, you all need the assistance and help that you can get if you've been a victim of any of these hurricanes from this season, whether it's Helene or Milton. We are in a situation where you need assistance and help, and we want to continue providing you information right here on the Recovery Report to make sure that you have that information so you can use it in order to help your business, your community association, or for yourself, whether it's for your own home properties as well as your auto, whatever it may be. We want to make sure you have the information you can use, and that's why we do this every single week, 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and we're now going live on Instagram so that we're getting this information raw. You're hearing us talk about it, and I'm joined by our guest, Bryan Gorrita. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. We're going to have a lot of fun talking about insurance. It's a boring conversation, or topic, but important conversation. So,
well, I hope the conversation isn't boring itself, but yes, the topic. I always like to say it's not sexy. Right? It's not that it doesn't get all people excited. In fact, most people will shy away from it because they're like, hey, look, I don't want to deal with my insurance. I hate dealing with the claims process. I don't want to deal with it. I just want to know what it's going to cost me, and I want to move on. I don't even think about it. But the reality of it is that we are all stuck in the same situation as a consumer, as I am. I'm sure you are as well. Mm-hmm. And we all buy insurance, whether it's for auto or home or whatever it is, and we deal with insurance all the time. But the reality of it is that sometimes the information that we're being fed by the people that we have elected or have been appointed may not necessarily be in our best interest to either follow or to without a little bit more understanding. And sometimes it's not delivered in the proper context because, there's been some stuff coming out that I just cannot believe my eyes, Bryan. It's been unbelievable.
I know. We're actually talking about a few of those things. And you sent me an article. I started doing a little deep dive into what's going on with Hurricane Milton.
I sent you an article?
No, you sent me multiple. You sent me a lot of them. I went through a rabbit hole, which I'm working on a video for that one. But, it started, you planted a little seed in my head. So with this hurricane that just passed through Florida, you have Helene, you have Milton. Apparently, from what I read in the article, the state of Florida is not considering those hurricanes as one combined insurance, right? Like you cannot file a claim as one. They're two separate storms, right? How does that work? So if I live in Tampa and let's say both these hurricanes went through me and they're back to back a week apart, how does that work with filing a claim? How do I get my money? Is there some weird loophole here where I don't get anything? It's a little confusing when I read that.
Well, I want to take a step back from all that just to put this in proper context because it's a question we get a lot is about, is this one or two losses or claims and how do I sort through or sift through the damage, literally, I'm not even figuratively, sift through the damage to figure out what was damaged by this versus that. It happens so close together. The last time that we can see something that was this extreme that I can point to that, was very relevant today, Katrina and Wilma. In 2005 storm seasons. Unfortunately, many residents in Florida probably didn't live here during that time as we had the great migration to South Florida area or I-4 South, if you will, because you have it on the West Coast and East Coast, right? And so they might not have experienced this. But the reality of it is that a lot of people sometimes, unfortunately, compare or utilize their experience in dealing with auto, health, life type insurance with property insurance, and they're just so very different. And I say that because in medical instances, sometimes you have this copay, you have these deductibles that add up. Well, for commercial, we have that, and we'll get that in a second. In some instances. But for homeowners, you don't. You typically don't have what in property we like to call calendar deductibles, where there's some sort of additive approach to the deductibles, where it doesn't matter if there was multiple hurricane losses. And again, that's on the commercial side. So on the residential side, it's important that you sift through it, but you're also sifting through and contrasting what was caused by flood versus what was caused by wind to further complicate the situation. And when your obligation under the Florida law, generally speaking, is to prove damage, you're talking about a construct that is just built in against your interest. It is a construct that is incredibly clever because in the policy, you have the duties in the event of a loss. Well, you have multiple losses. You have flood, you have wind, you've had 2 different flooding events, you've had 2 different wind events. So now you have to sit through in what is flood versus wind, what is from Milton versus Helene, your pre-existing issues and damages. We know that a lot of insurance companies historically have engaged in post-loss underwriting, where they've gone back and said, "Oh, that was long-term ongoing. That predates the policy," et cetera, et cetera. There's so many interesting constructs to the and complexities to this situation. It's really important, Brian, for these homeowners particularly to understand what they're up against, and that the insurance industry does not represent their interest. A lot of the insurance companies' representatives that go out there are overwhelmed with files right now. They don't have the time to invest in your claim. They're moving from one file to the next. They're then sending this information off to insurance companies' corporate headquarters, where we see a lot of the issues that we saw after Hurricane Ian. We talked about in our last episode. That's why we've had you back. I'm so excited to have you back. Where what was being written in the field and ultimately what was sent to the insured was edited by the people at some office, and then a check was issued for substantially less money. Now, think about the complexity of this situation where you have multiple different losses and you're tracking down your claims and you have this claim number versus that claim number. And I will tell you that we've already seen in one instance where an insurance company sent a letter in response to both claims with both claim numbers on to further complicate the issues. And we found out that the claims are being handled by 2 different adjusters.
Oof.
Okay, so who's looking at what and what is being cataloged and associated with what damage and how many of it? Like, if you don't have and that's where this homeowner was just like, you know what, we've had enough. Now, we represent this homeowner's business as well, so we're looking at multiple different situations to them and trying to navigate all of it. You can imagine the stress that they're under. So to further compound that, they saw this and were just like, oh my God, how am I going to deal with this? So we've stepped in to help these good people. And you've seen so much negative marketing against don't sign or no reason to sign documents with contractors or public adjusters or whatever. There's so much negative marketing right now from the state of Florida's representatives about people that are actually there to try to help. It's almost like they're spending so much time focused on that. They're not focusing on how these people can help you, or there's no information about how to vet people being put out by the state of Florida. Is one thing I actually put up. I was doing a podcast just like this. And the moderator is asking me about, where can I go find information about how to vet people? Because they keep telling me not to sign stuff. But I need to hire people. So what am I supposed to sign? Like, who should I be hiring and what documentation to sign? So a lot of reaction to your question. But on the commercial side, you do have what's called calendar deductibles. The misnomer is that you have a deductible. It doesn't matter how many storms, and you have to catalog all of your damages and then submit it. And then once you've exhausted your deductible, you have no deductible. That's an incorrect understanding. We actually had an attorney put out a memo on that. We immediately sent a response to it, correcting it, and educating, obviously, our audience on that issue. It's your all other perils deductible that would be associated with the next loss or damage. So if you've exhausted your deductible under the first storm, the next storm, it's not that you would have no deductible. You would have an all other perils deductible in most instances that we've seen. So very complicated situation. I know, Brian. Every time we sit down, I get this look, the big eyes. So
no, I mean, yeah. it's because it's a complicated thing, and it's, you're at a moment where you may have lost your business, your home is flooded, destroyed, and you don't know what to do. And it's interesting because people would be, me, myself, I would probably call the insurance company and ask them, maybe try to negotiate. And let me bring this back a little bit. So is there any benefit of me negotiating directly with the insurance company? I think there's this idea out there that, if you bring an attorney or the specialist in there, it's going to raise my premiums. I think everybody's scared about that. Is there any truth to that? What's the best approach? And then my other question to that is, to mitigate this risk, should I have recordings of my whole entire building before a storm? Is that something that insurance companies will take into consideration if I have proper documentation, or no?
So the funny thing about insurance rates starting there is that before even the first storm hit, right, before Helene devastated the let's call it the eastern portion of the United States, you had insurance special interest groups, insurance industry, the ones that are protecting the companies, already putting out all kinds of crazy data about how rates are going to go up and this is going to happen and that's, whatever. So, there was already a campaign for more rate increases. But fundamentally, as we spoke about on our last podcast, and I've mentioned many times on prior Recovery Report Lives, there's so much misinformation about the basis for which rates are established and what that means for you as a homeowner, business owner, community association, and the domino effect of the legislative efforts, and ultimately what we ultimately pay for our insurance versus how the ratings are done, the risk ratings for an actual property or a business. The reality of it is that you can't make your property any more riskier than it was yesterday, today, right? So other than uprooting its foundation and dropping it in an area that's more prone to loss and disaster. Now, it seems like the west coast of Florida is, but yet when we see rate increases, we historically see them impact the east coast of Florida mostly because that's the more populated area. And the rate increases are not, like when they say there's like a 7% rate increase, what we've typically seen is that it's not 7% across the board. No, it's basically, let's call it an average. I'm just using lay words, whatever else. It's an aggregate, really, of the rate increases throughout Florida. So we may see 10% in some areas and 1% in other areas. And I can't find a time where I've seen a direct correlation between a renewal on a property policy to someone's loss histories, particularly from a natural disaster. Okay, now there may be things you've done to that property to make it riskier, other than just uprooting it. Like you've, I don't know, you've changed the structure of it in some way, or something that in and around you may have impacted the property that maybe you didn't even change yourself. But really, risk ratings is done generally in the state of Florida, maybe by zip code or area, like coastal area. There was like this I-95 East. We've heard of it, like that's how they used to do it when we had real wind mitigation reports being done and you actually get discounts. There was that construct, right? So, but generally speaking, if you have a loss, it's not because you had a loss and you made a claim that you are going to experience a rate increase. You're probably going to experience a rate increase regardless. And the reality of it is that because I can already see the campaigning by the special interest groups pushing for further rate increases, despite the fact that, as I've shared with you information and data and statistics, the numbers don't support the need for it. I mean, there's massive profit centers being created within these insurance companies that is either unreported in one way or another to the state and others. And also there's this campaign on it was the litigation that was driving up costs, and well, that didn't really work out so well once we started actually getting it. Well, what information they could get, and then they slapped them on the wrist for not producing the information. I mean, there's so much misinformation out there, and it's just this mood, really, at the end of the day. Should our rates go up because of Helene and Milton in Florida? As far as I'm concerned, based on the projected total value of loss and damage that's recoverable under a wind policy, I will go on record as saying absolutely not.
So these hurricanes, the Milton, Helene, I live in Miami. My home's insured. When I renew the policy, because of those hurricanes, we should not, technically, because, budgeted, the money, all that, we shouldn't see my policy go up, right?
Well,
or could it?
We're not seeing the statistics that were proffered as basis for the rate increases for litigation as the reason why we couldn't get insurers to sell insurance here. It's just not there. And honestly, we don't have anything to actually further support it, even though it continues. We're not seeing the dollars that they're estimating for damages. If you dig into it, I know the big headline might say billions, about tens of billions of dollars, but what's actually recoverable, what's ultimately going to get paid? No. Look, there is so many claims not paid after Ian. There's like 50% of the claims are like still unpaid. Like there's so many losses, like not even paid. Yet they're saying there's dramatic impacts from all these hurricanes is causing our rates to go up today. It's like, yeah, but like most of them got denied because they said they weren't even covered. The claims that were being reported were not paid. So let's connect the dots. Correlation between the amount of loss and damage being reported and what is actually payable under a private insurer's policy for wind. The industry's going to, the special interest groups for the insurance companies is going to jump on the big dollar number at the top line, and they're going to ignore the actual smaller, the underlying details and statistics and data as it relates to what their clients, the actual private insurers, paid for these loss and damages, meaning flood versus wind. If I have a flood loss, which is total, like my total slab claim, my property completely disappeared, and the winds were rated at like 40-something miles an hour in that area, like let's say lower Naples area for one of the storms. Well, by the way, the wind was a contributing factor. It may have caused some damage, and you have to go prove that, and it's very complicated and everything else. But like any lay person to look at you and understand, it was like, yeah, it was a flood loss. Well, none of that is hitting the private insurer. None of that, right? So, except for the damage they can prove associated with the wind, but at 40-some miles an hour with a new metal roof on there, like, good luck trying to prove, what to what extent maybe you had some latent issue, whatever else, and you do have coverage for those interior water damage and everything else, but you got to prove that the window was damaged by the wind. It's very complicated, and it's not to say that you wouldn't have damages there and there wouldn't be anything recoverable, but you do have bigger deductibles. The average deductible is increasing, right? People are buying policies with 3, 5, 10% deductibles in there. So at the end of the day, like, what is actually being paid? Again, there's a lot of claims maybe being reported, but maybe they're being reported because there isn't coverage. Maybe they're being reported, but there's a deductible issue and there's not going to be a payment. So again, we got to kind of, top line, big number. Underneath that, the underlying data, again, like your litigation statistic. Yeah, high frequency of litigation, but also what's coming out is that there may have been a high frequency of fraud committed by insurance companies using the wrong estimating databases, improperly editing and changing reports being submitted by insurance companies. There's all this stuff that's contributing factors as to why there's an increased amount of litigation in this environment, right? But even the litigation numbers, there was like one number I saw, a statistic, throw it out there and I'm giving rough numbers, 16 billion versus like 500 and something million dollars paid. Okay, well that's a massive net delta, right? It was like, I think actually the number was like 16.6 billion, right? Versus like 500 million. 16 billion net. Like, where did that all go? Right? So like we gotta look closer at this information and data, and as consumers we can't be naive.
Do you think at one point Florida may be uninsurable with everything that's going on with the storms, sea level rise? The reason I bring this up is because I've heard it from different podcasts and I've seen it from articles. There's this fear that, the cost of insuring, Floridians is getting too expensive, and the insurance companies, are not sure, they're backing out, or they're getting scared, or they're tripling the premium so they can make their money back. Is that fear rooted in reality, or is that just, it's just scare tactics that are going on right now?
Make what money back? I mean, more profit, yes. Okay, they just want more profit. It's not that they're not making money, okay? Even some of the insurance companies that went insolvent, they weren't going insolvent, right? Because they were going insolvent, let's just say it this way. They were going insolvent because of what was being reported by the auditors as mismanagement. Mismanagement of money. It wasn't the litigation. In fact, it was never cited in a single report. It wasn't. It just wasn't. So is it uninsurable? Well, if the trends continue at the legislative level and allowing insurance companies to continue operating there, it's not that it won't be insurable. It's just that they just continue to have the leverage to make it more difficult and expensive for policyholders. And I say difficult and expensive because there's shrinkflation going on too. Is something else to note is that you're paying a hell of a lot more for something that has like way less coverage, right? So, I mean, you are buying the Rolls Royce and getting a substantially less item, product. It's not even comparable to what we were getting in, let's say, 2005 when to bring it back to an earlier statement about Katrina Wilma. The policies were completely different. Our insurance market was completely different, but yet there we were experiencing record storms and massive devastation. In fact, there was a run up to Katrina 1 where there was a storm after storm after storm, right? So, and then there was like a long period of time. It was like 13 years.
Yeah.
13 years. What happened?
What
What happened to all the money?
That's a great point. What happened?
Right. And now I will say, switching gears from private insurance market, okay, to federally funded insurance, flood, okay, is that there is legislative action. There has been over the last couple of years about why are the policies still stuck at $250,000 or $500,000 limits and $100,000 on contents, right? And there's this question about, and again, mismanagement, right? You can go back to Katrina and you think about and all of that mismanagement that was being reported by FEMA and NFIP with regards to those funds and where it was being allocated and what was being allocated. And there's some political underlying statements to these, some of this stuff with regards to what was going on after Milton. And there's a lot of controversy out there, particularly in an election season. So there's a lot of fingers being pointed, not making a statement regarding that, any political nonsense around it. But there is questions with regards to how this stuff is being administered and why we're so stuck at that. Because, quite frankly, what is $250,000 or $500,000 going to do for some of these homes that are in the barrier islands on the west coast of Florida? I mean, have you seen the size of them?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you're talking about a drop in the bucket. And so I honestly think that, yes, we need to get real on the private insurance market. What's really going on here? Let's get tough. The campaign that I'm seeing right now from the state of Florida as officials is like this fear-mongering over the people that are actually contractors, public adjusters, attorneys, experts in the field and representing in the interest of policyholders, helping consumers recover or communities. Whole campaign about don't sign anything. Don't do anything. It's like, don't take action. It's like, what do you, I'm scared to sign anything as a consumer at this point. Rather than trying to give a resource immediately after this, they're like, okay, these are the things that you need to be doing. This is what you want to do. And I'm not saying that it's all negative, but it's overwhelmingly negative and scary. And this is like scare tactic thing in a very complicated market where you have shrinkflation, high inflated cost of insurance, inflated. I mean, unsubstantiated costs, huge deductibles, compounding storms and events that are going on, and quite frankly, in a densely populated areas that many people have experiencing this type of devastation for the first time in their entire lives. I mean, the people in the Carolinas have never seen anything like this. You saw the receding waters now. Just this morning, I saw another river overflowing from the receding waters. And they believe they connected it to Helene, not even Milton. Okay? So that's experiencing today into areas that have no flood coverage. No flood coverage, not even insurance, right? What does this mean to them in the future? Particularly in Florida, where they're starting to see some of this flooding from Milton and Helene weeks after the storms are gone. It's not even raining anymore, and it's suddenly flooding in areas that they've never seen it before. Yeah, it's going to change the flood maps. The flood maps, there's a lot of controversy about how outdated they are, and then the risk rating around them and how much insurance is actually available. I mean, we can go on and on about this topic, but I believe the Florida market is insurable. I believe legislation needs to be tougher on it, and I think we need to get real about these campaigning with this funny information and data. When are we going to hold these people responsible for it? It's costing us as consumers so much money. I'm not only a consumer of insurance on my own private things, whether it's my homes, my cars, and everything else, but also as a small business owner in the state of Florida. I understand the dramatic impacts that this causes, and I see it, even being in the industry and understanding how to navigate these things. It's almost impossible.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think they're going to drop out. I know there's a lot of talks and people are speculating. I don't think the state will let it happen because real estate is I think top 3 in economic engine. Just selling real estate, transactions, property tax revenue. If we fail to get insured, you're talking about people who are FHA buyers, who are putting 3.5% down. They're required to have insurance. You're telling me the banks are not even going to insure them because that risk profile is going to go up like crazy. I'm not going to back up that loan at all. Go fly a kite. And then commercial, it's going to get even worse. I mean, right now, insurance is crazy for multifamily deals. It's difficult to start balancing out some of these deals right now.
Absolutely.
So it's like, all right, if the insurance companies back out And let's say that does play, which I agree with you 100%. That's not going to happen. But if it does, we're talking about, for the state of Florida, an economic depression. And I think I was looking at a stat here. If Florida were its own country, we would rank 15. I think we would match Spain's economy. You know, it's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. It's crazy.
Yeah, I didn't know that. And I did a little video to compare Florida's economy. I think we're actually bigger than Saudi Arabia, right? Think about that. So our economy is bigger than Saudi Arabia. You can fact check and look it up, but I don't think, I agree with you again. I don't think.
Is it still growing though?
You know.
I saw you post something about
yes.
like the, real estate is a big key indicator of, where the market's at, generally speaking, right? So like, I mean, what should we expect? Because honestly, I mean, I know there's a lot of concern over insurance values, but like on the real estate side, like I bought something, I've insured it, and I've taken the shot, and my bumps and bruises, okay? But like now what? Okay, I'm here, I'm in Florida, I got a job, it's decent, I can work remotely or not, whatever. But like, am I going to see an upside? Is it going to grow? Am I going to? Where do you think? Where do you think it's going?
I think right now, long term, I'm bullish on Florida. I think Florida has a lot of great things going forward. I think the real estate market's going to stay really strong. I'm bullish. I think short term, we're probably going to see a lot of volatility, maybe after the election. Not because I believe that a president is going to affect the economy, but more so, I think we're entering an economic cycle right now. So we had a lot of people migrated here to South Florida. A lot of New Yorkers who maybe weren't familiar here started buying up real estate, and now they're seeing property taxes are going up. They're seeing the insurance premiums are going up. And maybe if they bought in these older condominiums, they're starting to see now that, hey, there's no reserves. We put 30% down to move in. Now this building may potentially, we may have to foreclose or sell it to somebody or get out of our position. So I think that right now, Florida, short term, we're going to see some volatility. I think single family homes are probably the strongest asset class here because people want to own single family, and I think townhomes as well. But for condos, older condos, it's going to be concerning because that inventory, I've been looking at the chart, although people fight me on it, they tell me that it's starting to get normal, it's starting to get back to pre-pandemic levels. I have to say, when you have inventory shooting up that high that quickly and then prices haven't gone down, it's something that we all have to be a little bit concerned about. And right now banks are being very tight with how they're spending. So I think short term, the next 2 years, we got to see how all these laws and legislation shakes out. I know you've covered a lot of it with what happened with Surfside and the insurances, and you're in the forefront of all this. I mean, you're helping literally condominium owners with their insurance policies, trying to figure it out. Matt does a great job. He's educating everybody. Yeah. I think that in the next 2-3 years, it's going to be interesting. Maybe stagnant. I don't want to be pessimistic, but I think, let's see what happens. Who knows? Maybe something, it's hard to predict. I couldn't have predicted a pandemic, right? And look how crazy Florida grew because of that, in Texas and other states. But I don't know, Dan. I hope that a Category 5 doesn't hit us, though, right? If that happens, what's the scenario there?
Well, now there's a lot of fear-mongering about the storm coming from the southern hemisphere and then getting to the north. Like, it's never happened ever. There's always been this line across the equator where storms don't pass, and there's this predictive analysis showing that maybe for the first time ever that you. I mean, there's just things are different. Okay, generally speaking, but again, I mean, I just think there's whether it's real estate prospecting or the insurance market. I just think there's a lot of like talking heads, and there's definitely a lot of sheep, people just following the herd because it serves their interest. I think we just got to get real. I think the Florida market's solid. It is literally paradise. I mean, there's so much to offer down here. I say it all the time. I'm so grateful to live here, despite all of its issues, and enjoy what it has to offer. But the reality is that we got to protect it, and I don't think that we're protecting business owners, and when we're taking the side of the insurance industry, and I think that with a bit of with some fear mongering going on with regards to the real estate market, you got to be concerned about that in the state of Florida because it is such an important cornerstone of the economy and such a driver of it. And I think that we got to get real with it because if you don't protect the consumer as it relates to insurance, it's only going to impact those issues with regards to real estate market in general. I can't see how they aren't so connected. But when you go to Tallahassee, I tell you, I've done it many times. Like, it is very frustrating to be up there, coming from South Florida, and sitting with people from Central Florida and the West Coast of Florida in the highly populated areas, and hearing what some people have to say who live in very small towns that have just as much representation. I mean, it's an issue. I don't want to get into a whole political thing, but there's an uneven distribution of representation at times, and when you have an industry that has unlimited amount of money to lobby, that you have to contend with on such an important issue, I think we need to take a little finer look at where this stuff's coming from and what it actually means, and what we're going to do to be able to make sure that we get the correct information in front of the consumers and understanding it. And I was talking about, and I don't want to end this in our podcast here by not giving information people can use, because I just went on a rant about how I find from the state of Florida in the industry, they've just been fear-mongering. I don't want to fear-monger. I want to give people information they can use. And the reality is that's what we talked about deductibles. We talked about wind versus flood, which is always really important for victims out there. But also, we are hearing claims are getting assigned and reassigned and signed and reassigned. Now, I will tell you, Brian, after Hurricane Ian, this was a big issue. And California, right around the same time, took steps to mitigate this problem because they saw similar issues with regards to all the fires that were occurring. And there's actually a law in California which doesn't allow them to reassign a claim file. I believe, I have to go back and check it, but 2 or 3 times. In the state of Florida, we were seeing claim files get assigned 4 and 5 times. And the information was impossible to get your hands around as a consumer as to like where my claim was at. Now, think about compounding storms, lack of resources. The damage area from Helene and Milton is spread out all over the place. So people, be careful. Don't be deceived, in line with the title of the podcast today. Don't be deceived by your insurance company as saying, oh, it's been reassigned. If you hear that happen more than twice, I would say, then it's unreasonable as far as I'm concerned, and demand to speak with a manager at that point.
What do you mean reassigned? Do you mean reassigned like, all right, once my claim gets filed, do you mean reassigned internally with the insurance company?
Yeah, so it's not only internally, but also, so you have people with internally at the insurance company, but you also have these field adjusters that are typically contractors, legally speaking, as like employees, contractor versus employee, right? They're contracted by the insurance companies, outside contractors working for the insurance companies, not protecting your interests, that are sent out there to take pictures and put together evaluations sometimes. What we see is happening is that person comes out, they take pictures on behalf of the insurance companies, they claim their scoping is what it's called as an adjusting term, which is like making notes on damages to then go write an estimate. They use an estimating software, and then it goes in. And then it gets reassigned to another outside field adjuster who's a contractor, who then goes back to the property to do a reinspection. And this process keeps happening. Part of that process, as I spoke, is writing an estimate. And in the middle of the night, we received an emergency administrative rule change, that was proffered by the media as a protection for the consumer when you read deeper into it, it's not. And there's been many blogs now written about it, and I shared it with you, Brian, too. Again, the art of deception, right? It seemed like it was a good thing. But the more you dig into it, the more confusing and complicated it is. And you realize on the other side, I was going, wow, hell, this is confusing. So, and then in the middle of the night again, almost around the same time, it was like 7:55 p.m. the first one came, and then like a week later at 7 p.m. again, another a revision to that rule change hits us to clarify certain things. And the confusion was over this demand that an estimate needed to be written using this estimating software, which historically has problems and flaws, which is actually there's a class action lawsuit against an insurance company for using the wrong estimating database, which they believe this rule change is going to help and protect the consumer and whatever. There's a lot of information out there and show you why that's not true. And the revision is to address this issue, which something I actually raised on a public forum, which was, well, what happens if the consumer hired a contractor and contractor submitted an estimate or bid? This rule change is basically saying that that's not good enough.
Fascinating.
And it was confusing. It's like, well, wait. So does my contractor now have to use this estimating software? If they have to use estimating software, they have to pay for a license. That's a increased cost of doing the work. They don't know how to use it, so then they have to get trained. If they don't get trained, then they're not using it right. Brian, this was in the middle of the night we were getting these rule changes. So, and the media immediately jumped on it and said, oh, this is a consumer protection issue or helpful to the consumer because of this class action lawsuit on estimates and changing it and whatever. Brian, this is what you're contending with and dealing with. I bet you a lot of people tuning into this probably have no idea what I'm even talking about. Because it was, although I say the media, I'm not surprised because they're typically the ones that do publish things that are pro-insurance company, not so much consumer. Started publishing information about it. But again, it wasn't widespreadly known. It's not widespread known, but it's definitely an issue. If you don't know what I'm talking about, we'll make sure there's a link in the bio. You can go read about it and everything else. I don't want to get into it right now, but it is in line with the purpose of today's show. Brian, thank you so much for joining us, man. This is awesome.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it, brother. Like always.
Yeah,
Thank you, man.
It's a great show. If you're not following Brian, check him out on Instagram. Ton of real estate information. That's why I keep having him on here because, again, particularly where the impacted areas on the West Coast, and then you start talking about it a little bit here about the West Coast of Florida and some of the impacts in the real estate market. Check his feed out. Getting a lot of attention. You've been sitting down with a lot of important people. Let me say it that way. Whether they're politicians or appointees to certain situations, and also developers, and getting their side of the story, but hitting them with hard questions. And I think as this unfolds, this recovery effort, I think the market's in for some shakeup, and I think these interviews are so important. I mean, it's so important, and so go check him out online. Hit him up. We're going to make sure that his information is there as well. Again, Brian, thank you so much for joining us, man.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
This is awesome. Well, join us every single week right here on the Recovery Report Live. We're going to make sure that you have information you can use. We'll be joined by gentlemen like Brian and other people in the industry that want to provide you insights and information that are important to you as a consumer. So tune in every single week right here on the Recovery Report Live, 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. If you haven't already, like us, follow us on all our social media. We want to make sure that when we go live, you get the notification. We'll see you right here, same time, same place next week.